Anybody else want to respond to my question?
What I think is impressive about the two examples, and that I think is that these were both generated, as far as I know, democratically and freely by two communities arriving at a decision collectively. I think that and the village that decided that they were going to let the language go was making a collective decision that's very similar to the decision that millions of immigrants to North America have made over the last 2 centuries, where they decide that their children will best succeed in North America if they don't spend the time and energy that's required to learn the mother tongue. Often those children as adults, a bit like those children who complain sufficiently loudly that they stop taking piano lessons, as adults complain at what they lost. But I think that it's certainly not a unique phenomenon of people deciding that they are not going to pass on the language to their children. I think that one of the things that drives a community that can be a hugely revitalizing force is the fear of loss of language. What has driven the transformation of Quebec from a relatively backward, industrialized but oppressed in many ways society is 50 years ago an explosion of pride and determination to ensure that the French language not only survived but thrived and flourished. And yet there continues to be a sense of fear, even though there are 7 million francophones in Quebec and 4 million speak no English. A fear which I sometimes think there are now more people speaking French in Canada than has ever been the case ever before in our history. And yet there is a continuing residual fear that drives Quebec nationalism that unless, in many cases it's the argument behind the Quebec independence movement, unless Quebec becomes independent, they argue, French is going to disappear. Well, it's not going to disappear unless a whole lot of people make the decision that Mexican village made, and I see no indication that that's the case. The most popular television program, not just in French in Canada, is a talk show on Sunday night which attracts 2 million viewers because Quebecers want to see themselves reflected on television. It's a remarkably well-produced, dynamic, interesting, provocative television program that virtually anybody who's anywhere near a TV in Quebec makes sure that they watch it. In English Canada, where we have a larger population, more resources, there are very few programs that have that. We face the cultural competition with American television. And so it's much harder for, paradoxically, even though English is the majority language and the dominant culture in many ways in Canada, our films are not as successful, our television programs are not as successful because we are competing in cultural expression with the rest of English-speaking North America. But it's that fear that somehow language is threatened that has been the driving forces to make French in Quebec a dynamic, energetic, and vital cultural vehicle.
It's one of the best cases for fear I've ever heard. Monsieur Samasekou.
Madame, vous avez soulevé une question.